Why did 1950s sci-fi B-movies have so many knockoffs? Imagine a time when tiny budgets and big dreams collided on the silver screen. The 1950s was a golden era for science fiction movies, especially the B-movies that filled drive-in theaters across America. These films often looked similar, with monsters, aliens, and nuclear fears. But why were there so many copies of the same ideas? Well, it all comes down to money, audience demand, and the culture of the time. Back then, B-movies were made with very small budgets, sometimes as low as $100,000. That's tiny compared to big studio films which could cost $1 million or more. When a sci-fi B-movie made a profit, studios saw a chance to make more with the same formula. They could produce a new film for just a fraction of the cost and still attract audiences. Over the 1950s, more than 200 of these movies were made. That's a lot of alien invasions and giant monsters. The studios knew that if one film was popular, others could quickly copy its success. It was a simple way to keep the theaters full without risking too much money. The Cold War played a big role in shaping these movies. Many films focused on nuclear threats or extraterrestrial invasions, tapping into American fears about atomic bombs and the unknown. Movies like Invasion of the Body Snatchers and The Thing from Another World showed themes of conformity, invasion, and paranoia. Once studios saw that audiences responded strongly to these ideas, they kept making variations. They would take a nuclear threat or alien creature, set it in a small town, add a skeptical scientist or authority figure, and use practical effects that looked impressive but didn't cost a lot. These themes were easy to repeat and always drew viewers. Drive-in theaters also encouraged the flood of similar movies. These theaters needed fresh content regularly to keep people coming back. Audiences didn't mind seeing similar stories with different monsters or slight plot changes. The movies were made for entertainment, not for art or originality. Repetition was part of the fun. If you saw one film with a giant radioactive spider, you might see another with a different monster but the same basic story shortly after. Technological advances made it easier for filmmakers to copy successful effects. Once one studio learned how to create a convincing alien or giant creature on a budget, others quickly followed. Special effects techniques became more accessible, so making a monster movie was less about big budgets and more about clever ideas. Speed was another factor. Studios wanted to release new movies fast. Sometimes they could go from idea to theater in just a few months. This quick turnaround meant there was little time to develop original stories. Instead, they relied on proven formulas that worked. All these reasons combined created a flood of similar movies. But for audiences of the 1950s, this wasn't a problem. It was part of the charm. They knew what to expect and loved the familiar thrills with new monsters or twists. These films helped define the era's unique style of entertainment. The many copies weren't seen as cheap imitations but as a part of the fun, a way to enjoy the excitement of science fiction during a fascinating time in cinema history.